Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. I would like to speak about the case of Eleanor Grimmark. As you saw in the video, she is a licensed Swedish midwife and a nurse with a lifelong dream to assist women in childbirth and to care for mothers and the newborns. But yet her religious conviction that life begins at conception prevented her from taking part in abortion. When Eleanor applied for jobs, it was only within maternity care and delivery care, not abortion procedures. But still, she was denied work at several different hospitals in Sweden just because of her religious view regarding abortion. Freedom of conscience is a fundamental human right. It's guaranteed in the European Convention on Human Rights and should be respected. So Eleanor continued to apply for work, and eventually, a third hospital gave her a job, and they agreed to hire her with respect for her conscience. But as soon as her case became public in Sweden, she was interviewed by a newspaper, and the manager stated that no employee is allowed to publicly express opposition to abortion. The manager also said, "Someone with your views does not belong in a women's clinic." She had to move to the neighboring country of Norway to work as a midwife. Eleanor was simply asking to serve in the part of her profession that aligned with her conscience: delivery care and maternity care. What happened then? Well, the discrimination ombudsman in the district court found that her religious freedom had been restricted, but said it was justified to maintain the right to abortion in Sweden. And the Swedish Minister of Health commented approvingly on the judgment against Eleanor while the appeal was pending to the labor court. It was a clear break of the constitutional principle that a minister should not interfere with the judiciary. Also, what happened was that Sweden's former government coordinator against violent extremism, Mona Sahlin, publicly stated and compared my clients, the nurse and midwives who declined to perform abortions, to religious extremists fighting for the Islamic State. Doing this, comparing midwives that deliver children with terrorists, it closed the space for reasonable dialogue and creates a very hostile environment. So what followed was that a TV4 national news panel broadcasted a segment showing footage of Eleanor and me and her legal team entering the courthouse. And during the program, a commentator joked and said, "Those who oppose abortion should be aborted retroactively." And the whole panel just laughed about it. This public shaming on national television reveals how far intolerance for dissenting moral views has advanced, even in a country as Sweden, renowned for equality and human rights. It also resulted in public hatred. You just see one image there from social media, comparing me and Eleanor to Hitler. And we received emails and hate mails. "There should have been a contract for the murder of you both. Hope you get raped. Disgusting, vile human being." This was the environment when we fought this case in Sweden. And just to give you a broader perspective, Sweden suffers an acute shortage of midwives in delivery and maternity care. Women wait for beds. Midwives may indeed be responsible for 2 or 3 laboring women at the same time, sometimes more. And also, free abortion is available in Sweden. It's funded by the state until week 18, and until week 22 with a permission from the Board of Health and Welfare. There were 900 births per year at the third hospital where she applied for a job. Only one late-term abortion after week 18 at the delivery care. It wouldn't have been impossible for them to accommodate her freedom of conscience. And also, the Swedish abortion law in itself only allows doctors to perform abortion, not midwives. But the message was very clear. Your freedom of conscience ends where the ideology begins. A professor of law named Reinhold Fahlbeck wrote in the Swedish Law Review after the case was closed in the Labour Court, saying, "An observer might find it disheartening that a Supreme Court, by all appearances, allow itself to be governed by the parliament of the streets. It is a sad thing when politics is permitted to triumph at the expense of law. Strong words, yes, but necessary ones. Dixi et salvavi conscientiam meam. I have spoken and saved my conscience." So after she lost the case at the domestic level, we brought the case before the European Court of Human Rights, which declared it to be inadmissible. And also the court found that Sweden's interference was necessary in a democratic society. So I ask you the question, what kind of democracy considers it necessary to exclude a woman from her profession just for following her conscience? It's an important question to ask ourselves today. Her story is about protecting the integrity of a human person. It shows that religious freedom is no longer only challenged in authoritarian states, it's eroding quietly within our free Western democracies. And if a society cannot tolerate a midwife who wishes to bring life into the world, then I believe there's a crisis of conscience in the West, and I think it's urgent. And I'll just end this time with a quote I have on my wall in my office. It says, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politically correct? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that's neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but we have to take it because our conscience tells us it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. It was really interesting because you don't imagine that these things. What other cases like this of oppression have you experienced there? Thank you.
So in Sweden, we work to promote human rights in different levels, and we have another picture. I've written a book about this, and in my book, I call it the defense of the vulnerable, but I describe what is called the opinion corridor. And what is the opinion corridor? Well, it's an informal but very powerful boundary that dictates which views are socially and politically acceptable to express in a society. Those who step outside of this opinion corridor by holding a dissenting, religious, moral, or political opinion, they are at risk at being stigmatized, marginalized, or silenced, and being subject to public shaming. And in my book, I'd argue that this culture of conformity creates both self-censorship, it weakens the open debate, and it erodes the pluralism that our functioning democratic societies depend on. And we also see in Sweden, in such a liberal democracy, that there are hate crimes against Christians and other religion. 17% of hate crimes were religious related in the latest review, 2020. We also see that Christian asylum seekers have very much a challenging situation. There was a report 2017 showing that 123 Christian asylum seekers received 512 death threats, sexual assaults, and other violence. This is a report from Open Doors. And we also saw that there's diminishing right for religious schools. So we represent a lot of Christian schools and actually Muslim schools as well. So many political parties, especially the Social Democrats, they have a political pledge to ban all religious schools in Sweden, Muslim and Christian schools. So that's part of the cases we work with. We also defend Christian asylum seekers, Christian converts who converted from Islam to Christianity, seeking asylum, and they risk severe persecution, torture, and death penalty if they're deported back to Afghanistan. This is one of my clients. His name is Mustafa. You see the tattoo he has with the name of Jesus and the cross. You know what the migration board told us during the trial? When I said, well, if he's deported back to Afghanistan, they had sent him threats. We will cut your throat off. We're waiting for you in Kabul. We will kill you. And also, of course, it's a freedom of religion issue, but it's a freedom of confession and freedom of speech, because he should be able to keep this tattoo. And during the trial at the migration court, the person that was the legal representative of the migration board said, well, I have a solution. He can just wear a big headscarf every day in Afghanistan. We have a solution for that. You know, so that's the kind of issues we're facing for these Christian converts. So we made a report with 5 different Christian denominations, and we looked into 619 conversion cases, converts from Afghanistan seeking asylum in Sweden. 95% of them had certificates from a priest or a pastor that they were baptized, active members of the church, and genuine Christians. But still, 68% of them were denied asylum by the migration board. Why? Because they couldn't give the right answer to the questions. Just one example. They said, okay, cite all the 10 commandments. Number 2, name all the disciples of Jesus. Number 3, tell us about all the differences between Protestants and Catholics. And number 4, explain the problem of evil. Very good question to give to a person that cannot read, cannot write, and just recently came to Sweden. Okay, so now you understand why they were rejected. These questions were actually asked to the bishops of the Swedish church, and they gave the wrong answers too. Okay, so they were not genuine Christians according to the migration board. So what happened? We brought over 60 complaints to the UN Committee, the UN Committee for Human Rights and the UN Committee Against Torture. 32% of the cases, the deportation was stopped by the UN. And in 4 cases, the UN found Sweden guilty of violating the Convention Against Torture by deciding upon deporting the Christian converts. So I'll end with what is the most important thing here. Religious freedom is a basic human right. It's not a privilege. Thank you.